Hello there, welcome to our show. This is the start of a new series. It's going to be a very random series. It's not going to be every week or anything. It's not going to be what the hell is this type of thing. It's called They Needed This Failure. And it's basically about directors who have a failure, but actually it was one of those failures that actually kind of spurred them on to more of the best work. Like, it's one of those things that sometimes directors need to fail to learn something, to move on and actually get good again. You know, it's that kind of thing that not every failure is a bad thing, ultimately. Sometimes directors need a failure to realign their talent and actually get good, you know. So it's I think the general idea was once directors have some failures, they want a downturn, they're going to go all the way down again. And some do that, but other ones don't. It just depends, really, in director. But so that I'm going to start with 1941, the Spielberg failure. I've got a couple others planned, like the Dealing Limited by Wes Anderson and De Palma's Body Double. I'll be doing them as well in the coming weeks or months. Depends how fast or slow I am at it. But 1941 was Spielberg's big failure after his massive hits with Jaws and Close Encounters. Even though the film actually did pretty well, it was critically slammed, and it was like, okay, is this Spielberg on his way down? But then he followed it up with Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T. So obviously it wasn't him down, it was just a little blip. But the thing is, the film itself is really well directed, and the idea is good, but he made mistakes in it that probably could have been sorted there and then, you know, that obviously went too far with certain things. But it's one of those films where you obviously learn from his mistakes. He did not make these mistakes again. But it's one of the things, the excesses of this film actually is one of the reasons why people like me love it. Because it is crude at times, it is disastrously messy at times. There are things that are overplayed horribly. There are things that are insane. It spends way too much money in certain things. There's certain things you're like, you don't need that. Like, why do you need this? This is insane. But that's part of the charm of the film. It's massively excessive. Some of the characters are massively excessive. Some of the characters, you get them about early on, and you've got another 20 minutes of them, and it's like, we don't need half of this stuff. But we get it anyway. But it is one of those things, is like, Spielberg really learned from this. I mean, so even in his later films, you know, it wouldn't go as far, even if he did stuff that wasn't quite as good as some of his better films, it would never go as far as crazy as 1941 again. The only other time I think he really hit a wall when he needed to pull back was a far less successful film, and that was Hook, where he hit a wall with that one with sentimentality and just been very aimless and very studio bound, and that made him suddenly go far more realistic with his films, and he went straight to Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. It was like another one where he kind of probably needed to hit a wall so he could get rid of some habits that weren't helping him. But this one was the early version of that, and it was one of those ones where there was a lot of talent involved in this film. Behind the scenes, in front of camera, everywhere. This film was crammed with talent, and you feel like nobody said no to anybody. And there's the reputation of this film is there was a lot of cocaine involved in behind the scenes. I don't know who. I mean, obviously Belushi, but it was the 70s in America. It was shot in, you know, LA, which was basically the pit of drug abuse in American film at the time. It was just like, I mean, Spielberg was apparently not a druggie at all, but there's plenty of others that probably were. But you can't get the feeling that Spielberg was getting all that energy out of his system just by the camera work. You know, he was into another kind of drug. You know, filmmaking. He was like kind of a filmmaking bender in this one, for good and bad. Because there's some great stuff in this film, but there's also some stuff that's that, you know, which is almost like the film equivalent of someone having a cocaine bender. You know, and thinking they're funnier than they actually are. So yeah, I mean, it was Spielberg trying to be funny. Spielberg's not great when he's trying to be broad and funny. He's much better at the small character jokes and letting actors be and letting actors interact and being funny that way. Because there's a lot of stuff in Jaws that's really funny. That's just basically Schneider, Robert Shaw, and Dreyfuss annoying each other, and that's so much fun in anything in this film. Straight away, it is. There's some nice bits of Dreyfuss being a total dick in Close Encounters. It's really funny. There's a lot of dark humour in Duel, which is really funny. You know, Spielberg can be funny, but it's a lower level energy. It's a kind of, it's not like laugh out loud funny. It's quite dry humour, and it's, when you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's hilarious, but it's not like try to get a joke and a big laugh. It's funny because it's just little bits of humour within the action, and it's visual humour that really works. It's not overdone. And, you know, it continues throughout his film. He's actually a funnier director than people like to admit. You know, because he can be so sentimental at times that it takes away from the kind of sneaky humour. You look at some of the films he produced in the 80s. Like he produced Gremlins. He produced Back to the Future trilogy, which are all funny films, you know, and they're all kind of dark. And Temple of Doom's a hilarious film. It's dark humour. It's like a young boy's revenge on. It's like trying to gross out your parents type of movie. It's trying to gross out everybody type of movie. It's really funny, but in a shameless sugar junkie way, which this film also is. But Temple of Doom's a better version of it. It's a kind of dark side of Spielberg that's actually quite interesting. But anyway, to the film. The film was actually produced by John Milius, and it was written by Zemeckis and Gale, who were just starting out at this time. They were not the people who were going to make Back to the Future yet. They were just students who Milius liked, who thought they had talent and they thought they could do something. And Spielberg noticed them and actually took them under his wing. And he had this script called the night the Japs invaded, which is all about the paranoia of, you know, American populace just after Pearl Harbor's hit, and they think they're going to be invaded by the Japanese, and it's all about paranoia, gripping people, being behave irrationally. Now that's a really good idea for a film. You could remake this film and cut down the excess, and you could have a really funny film. The idea's great, but you have to do it a certain way, and this film doesn't do it that way. This film just goes to excess. So there is that. That's a problem, and it is written as a Zemeckis film where it starts off slow and quietly gets crazier and crazier and crazier until everyone's crazy on a shithouse rat. That's the early Zemeckis filmmaking. You look at I Want to Hold Your Hand and Used Cars, and even Back to the Future, that structure of it getting crazier and crazier and crazier and crazier as it goes on. And this film is almost a template for that kind of filmmaking, but it's how you don't do it. Because the characters who are meant to be your identification figures who make mistakes are kind of pushed aside a little bit, and the crazier characters are forced to the front and just take over the film. And it's like, no, if you'd stuck with those characters, it would have worked a lot better. There's also the thing is, there's a kind of crazy spiral effect of people doing stupid things that create other problems. But it's not as well crafted as some of the later films Zemeckis and Gale did, where this leads to this, this to this, this to this, and you can follow a lot quicker, and it comes together easier. This one, it's not joined as well, but it's still fun, because it's people being absolutely crazy. I mean, I say that it goes too far, but that's part of the joy of the film. The film is crazy. And that's wonderful. That's what's really wonderful about it. It's also the thing that kills it. There's because they're bringing people from Animal House, because Animal House had just come out as a massive hit. So you have Tim Matheson from Animal House, you have John Belushi, and you've got that thing of trying to be Animal House, but in World War II, and that does not work. Belushi works. Belushi's hilarious. Belushi's this weird character who floats through the film, but he's got his own little subplot. He's this pilot who's absolutely insane, and he thinks he's paranoid as hell, and he's causing havoc. He's like the loose cannon throughout the film that causes all this havoc, and he's funny as hell. He was not well appreciated at the time, his performance, but it looks really good now because it's really funny. Because he is insane, he is also sweet and weird and just odd. Just as an oddball character that's just floating through the film. So that works. Tim Matheson's the one that does not work. He's the kind of thing that stalls the film constantly. He's in these scenes with Nancy Allen, who actually does work in the film, but Tim Matheson's too sleazy for this part. He's playing this guy who's trying to get off with Nancy Allen, who is a thing for planes, which is a funny idea. Nancy Allen was in I Want to Hold Your Hand, written by Galen Zemeckis, and she's in all the De Palma films, and De Palma and Spielberg are massive pals. So they're all in the same orbit. But she got the humour of Galen Zemeckis, and Tim Matheson just didn't seem to get it. He seemed to push too hard with the sexual metaphors and everything. And he was too slick, and it's like there's too much of these scenes anyway, but he's pushing it too much, and it's like because he's got charm, it's enjoyable enough. But it's one of those things. It's grating because it's like you're getting in the way of the rest of the film, and the rest of the film is much better than some of this stuff. But it causes some of the havoc later on, and it's a funny idea of this guy who's so obsessed with a woman. He will cause havoc for everybody because he's so egotistical. But they miscast it. It's the big problem is they miscast this part. They needed someone who was a bit more desperate. And he was too sleek, and you needed desperation. And there was no desperation. That's what you needed from this part. Like someone who would do this stuff, who would be this insane to do it. And that's what some of the other parts have, is these people who are desperate and stupid. And this part doesn't have it, and it really needs it. You have Bobby DeCicco and Perry Lang, the two kids who are just want to go to a dance, and both of them would turn up in The Big Red One, which is one of the great war films. And but their stuff has a lot more charm because they're younger actors, and that's what the film needed more of that. And that's much more what Zemeckis and Gale would bring to their films, and focus on that kind of charming loser character who's struggling to survive. He's just trying his best. I mean, if you look at I Want to Hold Your Hand, it's full of those kind of characters. They're all kind of slightly insane, but they haven't thought stuff through, but they're really trying their best. That kind of stuff works, but it's swamped by all the big production value stuff. And that needed more space to grow, to get people into those characters and then have their story go through. But they didn't have enough patience to give that stuff another 10-15 minutes early on and say, okay, we'll get to the crazy stuff later. Because that's what it needed. It needed a longer build-up to start with. It needed a much longer build-up just to get these, who the characters are. The characters you might be following. So that's one of the big problems with the film. Even for someone who likes the film like me, there's not enough setup. There's really not enough setup. But there's things like that that kind of work but aren't given the space to work fully. And it's funny because you see like in Back to the Future, they had the same setup, characters who are flawed in this crazy situation, but they gave it the time then to actually understand we need the time before we go to the crazy stuff. And that's why Back to the Future works, is to give it the time, and this one they did not give it the time. And I think it's obviously given to Zemeckis, Gale and Spielberg all understood that that was a massive mistake they made in 1941. They did not give these characters time. And it's obviously, it's one of those films that's like, Zemeckis would have made a better version of this film, but Spielberg made a crazy version that's actually probably more enjoyable because it's so crazy. It's like one of those things, you could have a better version of it, but I kind of like the crazy. Even when I talk about Tim Matheson being miscast, it's still enjoyable seeing how crazy and creepy he is. He's a total sociopath. I just think he could have been a bit more subtle sociopath. You've also Dan Aykroyd turning up as in charge of a tank, and he does Dan Aykroyd stuff, like he can do speeches really fast and talk really fast, and he goes insane halfway through because he's hitting the head and he goes completely nuts. And all that stuff's enjoyable. It's not the most hilarious stuff, but it is fun. And it's like they're likeable characters, so you quite enjoy being around those kind of characters. You have Treat Williams as another total sociopath who's after the leading lady, who's the probably Cecil character in love with, and he's trying to save her from this character who's trying to have sex with her, Treat Williams. And also we've got her best friend in love with Treat Williams, and she's chasing him like a lunatic. And that's really funny as well. I mean, the whole thing with Treat Williams is really tasteless now. You never do this now. But it's so tasteless, it's funny. It's just like, this guy gets what he deserves at the end. And he's an antagonist, he's horrible. But it is enjoyable because he's a character, you're just waiting to see him get his desserts because he's so horrific. And he's involved in a lot of the best stuff in the film. Because you've got basically the best part of the film takes place, like, what should have been halfway through, but it takes place a bit earlier, which is the jitterbug contest, where CCO has been letting a jitterbug with his girl. He has to steal some soldiers' clothes to get into the thing, and then he just starts jitterbugging, and it's a great sequence, because Spielberg's having a ball doing this sequence. He loves musical numbers. Anytime you give a chance to do a musical number, he's always good. It's always great, because you can tell he loves musicals. And then halfway through, all hell breaks loose and the fight starts, and you've still got the jitterbug energy going into the fight as well. And all that stuff's crazy and it's great, and it's the best part of the film. And that whole section is wonderful. And that whole section is what the film should be. And it's funny because that's when you see Spielberg become Spielberg, the jitterbug contest. Is because early Spielberg was doing suspense adventures. Like Jaws is a suspense adventure. There's adventure moments in it, but it's using suspense mechanics like Lang did, like Hitchcock did. You know, this thing it was action adventure, but it wasn't that much adventure. Same with Close Encounters. You had a few sequences of action, but they weren't massively ambitious. They were really well done because Spielberg knew what he was doing. Same way in Duel, he knew what he was doing, but a lot of it's suspense. This is Spielberg learning how to do action, which would take him on to Raiders of the Lost Ark, then Temple of Doom, and all those other action-adventure movies that are all really well done. This is really the first time he really showed off what he could do. And this is what I think got him in trouble, because I think he got carried away, and then when he got to Raiders, George Lucas and say, calm down, you can do stuff, just calm down a bit and it'll work. You don't have to throw everything at the screen every second. And suddenly it worked really well. He knew he was off to the races from then on with the action stuff. But this is the first time when the jitterbug, you saw him really come into his own. But then later on in the film, he's doing all these fight scenes of planes going flying all over the place and stuff. And it's like, it's way too much. That's what makes it enjoyable, because it's way too much. But it's like, it's not really that effective as a suspense action beat or anything, or a comedy beat. But it's just wonderful to watch a director just go completely mad. That's why I said Spielberg was like on film cocaine in this film. He was going way too excessively far. And you can tell him he's enjoying the hell out of himself. But it's too far. But the jitterbug is where he figured out how to... where he can have multiple stuff going at the same time, cutting from shot to shot, very smoothly. And you'd have the main action going on, but also background stuff that connects up to the main action as it develops, and you know, they just smash together and cause havoc. It leads on to the next bit, which you'd see a lot of in the Indiana Jones films. But this is where he learned how to do it more. Or he knew how to do it, but this is the first chance to really do that. And the jitterbug contest stuff, all that stuff in that building is just really well done. Then later on, he's just so much stuff all over the place to try and bring together, it's not quite as cohesive. See, I think Spielberg is much better when he's got a location where he can build and build and build from. So that's why I think this film is very important to progress. It's to actually have the budget to try and do these things he's probably wanted to do for a while, but also to know how to go too far and say, okay, I've went too far, let's pull it back, and let's not have to do everything at once, you know. And it's like a director learning from his mistakes. Like, this loud humour is not really me. This quieter stuff I should have been focused on is really me. And he actually was smart enough to see, okay, that's a Zemeckis Guild thing. They know how to build it more than I do. So I'll just produce for them, and they can do that stuff, which led to the Back to the Future trilogy. You know, so he learned from his mistakes. He learned like what he was good at, and also you look at like E.T. and Raiders, stuff like that. He learned to go back to the quiet character stuff. I maybe adding a bit of humour, a lot more humour in Raiders, and he can be silly a little bit, but not go too far with it. You know, because Raiders is broader than something like Close Encounters, but it's nowhere near as broad as 1941. So it's a calibration from this film that you actually worked out, like, okay, this is what I need to do from then on in. So that's why it's a very important film for Spielberg. It's like sometimes the failures are what a director needs to actually develop and actually become who they need to become. They need a failure, you know. Some directors, it's like they're not going to learn from their failures, but obviously Spielberg did. Like he looked at what he did and was like, okay, that has to go, that has to stay, you know. And that jitterbug sequence in the middle was definitely the start of Spielberg, the guy who could really do action and really have levels of interaction between background and foreground, and the things seemingly going crazy but always in control, you know, which you'd see him elaborate on with Raiders and Temple of Doom and Last Crusade, and then onto other films, you know. So there's a lot of stuff here that actually was going to work later. And there are some wonderful stuff I even never mentioned. There's Eddie Deason and Murray Hamilton on the on this big spinning wheel thing at this amusement park that goes out of control, and there's a dummy there as well. You have Slim Pickens and Chris Free and Mifune in a Japanese sub, and Slim Pickens is going insane. It's wonderful. He's completely over the top, but Slim Pickens over the top's always good, so it doesn't matter. And watching those Chris Lee having to keep a straight face while Slim Pickens is going absolutely to the moon and shooting every bit of scenery available is fun as hell. When Ed Becky with a big gun destroyed his own house with a gun, all that stuff's hilariously fun. You know, it's not laugh out loud, but it is fun just to watch the demolition derby of these people just going insane. Again, it could have been built up a bit more subtle, but it's still enjoyable to see the final result. With Robert Stack as the guy in charge of the entire defence thing, wondering what the hell is going on while he watches Dumbo, which is the most moving part of the film, is him watching Dumbo. And you've got Warren Oates as this lunatic in the middle of the desert that everyone... He's really got one plane and he's completely insane and he thinks there's Japs all around him. There's all these weird character actors doing their weird things that all kind of work. You're always glad to see them, even though sometimes you're thinking, did we really need this? Probably not. Or did we need to this a bit more subtle? Probably. But the excess really works after a certain time of year. Anyway, that's me in 1941. I hope you enjoyed my ramblings. That's me for now. I'll see you later.